Hello, friends. Greetings once again. I hope you're all doing well. Be ready for a new episode. Today we will talk about a very famous and brave character in the Okran scene. He has countless feats and many stories. Most have heard of these in corridos or tales because people really enjoy sharing these anecdotes. So let's introduce him once and for all. I'm talking about Gonzalo Inzunza Inzunza, the famous Machoprieto. Well, friends, as far as I know about Gonzalo, he traces his ancestry back to Nabolato. Around those parts I'm not very sure, maybe from Potrero de Italia. But I do know it's from those parts of Navolato. Gonzalo's nicknames, well, the most famous are El Machoprieto, El MP, and 11 or El Señor de las Bazucas. Gonzalo has been working since the 90s. He had its own structure and its people for the merchandise smuggling. And as Vicente said in his book, in those years, Gonzalo and his crew were involved in many clashes and confrontations around Culiacan. Gonzalo was very fierce, and the Yoma, when he found out about him, he ordered Vicente to meet with Gonzalo to investigate what all the confrontations were about. A few days later, Vicente took Gonzalo to his dad, and in a meeting, Gonzalo told Yoma and Vicente what was happening and what it was due to. The reason for so many confrontations was that he had issues with some people, and the leader of those people was called Negro. El Yoma asked Gonzalo to please reduce the violence because it was heating up Culiacan too much. That was drawing government attention. And well, that's obviously never good for business. Gonzalo told him it was okay, that he was going to reduce the violence, and he would try to reduce the number of confrontations. And he offered his services to Yoma, which consisted of moving the merchandise and money across Mexico. And just like in those years, Yoma was waging a war against the Arellano Felix. So Gonzalo also offered to help Yoma with that, and to put his people at his disposal to fight against the Arellano. This is a photo of Gonzalo El Machoprieto. The Yoma. He found out about the Machoprieto because, as I already told you, there were quite a few clashes, but there was one in particular that happened at Las Quintas neighborhood. Machoprieto and Chalo Araujo encountered when Machoprieto was not yet part of Telcar, and Chalo Araujo was already one of the most important Tolarospis, and did not know and had never heard of Gonzalo in that confrontation that were given. A person from Chalo Araujo fell, and that's when they started to investigate to see who that Gonzalo was, a relative of Chalo, from the Quintero family. He was the one who made that connection between Chalo and Gonzalo, and hence it also comes from there. They told Yoma, and Yoma told his son Vicente to bring it closer at that time. Chalo Araujo. He was the one going around Culiacan, and everyone respected and feared him. Listen to this. Over the years, when El Machoprieto becomes part of the organization, a large group of Mangun, among them, Chalo and El Macho primarily, carried out an operation where state police were also involved. Well, that operation was by Badi Iraguato, more specifically for the town of La Para, because they were going to hunt down Alino Portillo Cabanillas, very famous indeed, as he was one of the strong men of the Arellano Felix, and was one of those responsible for the massacre in the town of Limonchito. That is when. It all happened on February 14th, and several of Javier Torres Felix's relatives were resigned. Lino Portillo was a very famous drug lord who gave the Yoma a hard time like you wouldn't believe. He got all the way to Puerto Rico and almost resigned Yoma, but that's another story that I'll tell you in another episode. Well, In the operation to take down Lino Portillo, there was a clash between them and Lino Portillo. There, Lino Portillo was wounded. They shot him in a buttock. But they couldn't find him. After all that happened, about 2 days later, the entire police force went up to the mountains and surrounded Lino. Because of the wound, he couldn't move. And who do you think was leading the operation? None other than the Yoma's #1 tough guy, Commander Chuitoño. And with him was also Commander Polanco. They were the ones who found and arrested Lino Portillo, who was found lying unable to move because of the wound he had in the buttock. He was admitted to the Aguaruto prison. When he gave his statement, while being heated, he said he was a bodyguard for Benjamin Arellano Felix and confessed many other things. Well, a few days later, of course, what was going to happen happened. His fate was already written, and he said it himself in a statement. People from the Yoma's organization are going to resign me. And said and done, it happened. He was found hanged in his cell. I don't remember what they called the one who hung him, but he was another one who was really crazy. For those who think Gonzalo was just a man-gun boss, that he was crazy and fierce and only good for shooting, and to cause disorder, believe me, it's not like that. Gonzalo, besides having firepower because he had a lot of people, he also moved large amounts of merchandise. He moved tontas. The thing is, he also had a lot of money. So, it's not a character like the vast majority of bosses or commanders or people who have their own armed group. For instance, Manuel Torres Felix. He had his people, but in reality, he didn't have much money. Or another example, the Cincuenta, the Sony. He was the plaza boss in Culiacan, but he didn't have any money. Or the Chinese Anthrax. He too had power, money, and people, but didn't move the amounts that Gonzalo did, nor did he have all the people or the infrastructure that Gonzalo had. No comparison. The Bravo, he had power. He had a lot of people, and he did have a bit of cash. I'm saying this by comparing, you know? I think it can be said. It was when Gonzalo catapulted to fame during the confrontation with the government in Sonora. More specifically in Obregon and Navojoa. This anecdote became famous with the corrido they composed called the Bazookazo. There were several well-equipped men in various trucks, some of them armored. In Obregon, policemen tried to block their way, but Gonzalo's people immediately subdued them. And with bursts of gunfire as a way of intimidation and by flashing their badges, they made their way through. Not without first subduing some police officers and disarming them. I don't remember exactly. But what I can assure you, it's just that Gonzalo was on the Mazatlan boardwalk exercising with a bazooka on his back. Why? Gonzalo had a lot of people under his command. I'm referring to Tolarospi and Pointers. He had hundreds of people making him really strong. And I'll tell you about Gonzalo's system. As he gained more rank and more money and more power, everyone wanted to be his people. Because he was highly respected and fierce, he was violent and aggressive. Then, the stories were heard in Culiacan, and the corridos of Machoprieto, and everyone wanted to be from his crew, because they respected and admired him a lot, and Gonzalo had the great idea to give everyone his badge, and he disarmed them all. I'm saying El Chino was talking to Gonzalo. In the form of mockery, Gonzalo was no longer liking that. It was driving him crazy, until he said something else. From the same type, he asked the musicians for a corrido that was very popular at that time about Gonzalo, and said to Gonzalo. He told Gonzalo, listen to it, and with that, Gonzalo exploded. And then he said, okay, what the hell are you doing then? I'm not with you. What the hell are you on about? Saying stuff about musicians and the bazooka, what the hell is your problem? I'll kill you here, son of a... But El Chino saw it coming that time. Now, Let's talk about another character also very close to Gonzalo, Sinovio Flores Pacheco, nicknamed El Checo or El Seis. Gonzalo had a person named Everardo Iribe working. They called him the Guarito from Badiraguato. This blonde guy I'm talking about. He was Gonzalo's type, tough, and he liked resigning people. And he didn't think twice about it, since this Guarito was the one who gave the resignation back in 2003. More or less. Gonzalo had saved Vicente at a taco place in Culiacan. There, between the Popular Colony and the Morelos Colony at the Tacos de la Cuchilla. That's what it's called. Then the feds showed up for Vicente, and Gonzalo came to rescue him. It turned into a big mess. The person in charge of all that operation was El Russo from Sonoita, who in these times is already a well-known person and has much more powerful than back then. Gonzalo, as they say, he had a factory of warriors. It can be said that he left a legacy of a warlike school, because all his commanders and his men were tested in combat, for example, the P1. The Checo, the Queta, the Cayman, the Guarito, and as the P1 rightly said in the audios against 90, he was making and unmaking at a very early age. For example, there was also another one of Gonzalo's men who was nicknamed the Cayman. When they finally knew where Aristeo was, the younger brother, they went for him. But he was already expecting them. And as soon as they opened the door, Aristeo greets him with gunfire, and the first to fall was the famous Mele, to whom they also called the Nine and who was hit in the chest, and his companions helped him. It was Charlie who runs in Puerto Peñasco. He is in charge there at the moment, and is also one of the strong men that Gonzalo had. And also, you can't forget to mention the hippie, a very capable, very centered man. But the thing definitely got smashed, because with that move, Gonzalo went crazy. Because he really valued Meche. Once, around 2 in the afternoon, Gonzalo was acting crazy, as usual. Well, he started marching down Obregon Avenue in Culiacan, Sinaloa, which is the main street with all its people. He was leading the way with his bazooka slung, and behind him all his armored people marching to the rhythm of 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Just like they were parading on September 16th.